Today I'm here to celebrate World Snake Day. And as a celebrant, I sometimes have to honour the life of someone who wasn't necessarily the most popular with their family. And today, honouring the snake doesn't feel particularly natural for me because they're an animal that I guess I have an inbuilt reflex to dislike or to distrust, or I wouldn't say to be scared of, because I've never had an interaction with a snake, but I think I've touched some that friends have had, or I've met people who are petting snakes, so I've been able to feel its skin and to have a kind of at a distance, slightly uncomfortable interaction with. But yes, snakes are not an animal that I feel a particular affinity to, and I'm sure I'm not alone there. It seems that those characters that are particularly drawn to looking after snakes are fairly few and far between, and perhaps understandably so. Just the other day with my children, we were looking through a nature book and measuring the sizes of particular snakes. I had no idea that the king cobra, which as I looked at pictures of it, it's a pretty meaty snake. The Egyptian king cobra grows to 3 meters long. 3 meters long. That was the width of our living room. And then uh, we looked at a python that was 7 meters long. That was the length of our living room. My children couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. They can be huge creatures, and of course, some have poisonous bites that can kill, and some strangle, suffocate their prey to death, and prey that is many times larger than us. And I was thinking about humans and how many humans must have been consumed by pythons and constrictors over the annals of time, going back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I mean, especially small children, babies lying on the ground or lying in a tree. It's no surprise that humans have developed this really deeply felt concern for the presence of snakes. And I must say that I'm quite glad to live in a country like England in the UK, where snakes are very uncommonly seen. And I also must admit that when I moved to Australia for a year, I found it very disconcerting to know that I was sometimes in the very close proximity to snakes. I remember there was one house where I was visiting someone who lived in the rainforest, who was telling me about the snakes that lived in his walls, in the walls of his house, huge snakes that would leave massive marks when they urinated. So there would be a huge strip spanning the full width of this living room where you could see the trace of where a snake had been. Um, so, yeah, I can, feel it down my back, and here at the foot of this massive tree that I'm standing under, I also think of how the mythological tales have so often seen the danger of the snake lurking in the trees, and how, it's probably for good reason, but this has also taken on biblical proportions. The way that the snake has then been associated with um, the devil, or let's say evil, negative forces. It's the sound of snakes that are often used to create fear in horror films, and I'm thinking of Slytherin in Harry Potter's. It's not a particularly positive connotation, although interestingly, I did hear someone with a take on the role of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, in the story of Genesis from the Bible, and how it's possible that one could accredit the evolution of consciousness in human beings to the snake. that gave Adam and Eve the idea, the confidence and the will to take their place in the Garden of Eden, to be able to eat of the tree of good and evil, and that the snake was indeed playing a role on behalf of God. Whether or not you subscribe to the religious sentiment, at least there's, as a story, kind of very positive and negative ways, usually negative, but you can read these stories about snakes in very positive ways, and in giving a vote of thanks and celebrating snakes today, I really want to take the time to think of the symbiotic way in which we have developed, because it's the alertness to the snake that has arguably supported the development of our acuity of eyesight. It's the presence of danger. It's the presence of predators that sharpens our attention and develops it into something that protects us. It's our alertness to threats that creates a presence and also, in a strange way, a sense of valuing life. They say that, well, there are many famous adages about knowing your enemy, and how your enemy is in many ways your greatest friend, because they give one the purpose, the drive and the determination to overcome one's weaknesses, to develop skills that one might otherwise not have to. Like I say, a snake isn't something I feel particularly drawn to spending time with. And yet at the same time, I can see how many things have quite possibly arisen out of our human relationship with snakes. Imagine the reassurance for those who lived in the presence of snakes when the sharpened edge of a sword or a very large knife was finally developed. And how I imagine those early people sharpening their blades, thinking of how they could at least protect themselves or even attack a snake should they encounter one. How the focus required to sharpen a blade, to sharpen an edge, especially when just doing it with rocks, how that would focus the patience and the determination of those early warriors that are indeed our ancestors, our antecedents, that have managed to, through their survival and the survival of their offspring and their offspring and their offspring, brought us to this stage of life where here we are, able to celebrate almost a conquering of the snake in so many domains. It's very rare that people have daily encounters with snakes, those living in the civilized world. And, you know, one might say that's just because we've managed to overpower the natural world and dominate it with our buildings and roads and structures and gardens and creating these artifices of nature. But I see us as an extension of nature. We're part of nature. We cannot, and nothing cannot be anything but part of nature, because we've all grown out of this earth, just like the snake. And so its role, even though I might struggle to fully embrace it, let's say, and possibly for good reason, I embrace the role of the snake here in this world, for how it's educated us human beings, for how it's helped to focus our attentions such that we might be the entities that we've become. So today I'm celebrating World Snake Day, July the 16th, and giving thanks for the snake. There's one last thing I really regret not including, and the snake has a very profound lesson to be able to teach all of us. The snake sheds its skin and is able to leave its cast, its outer shell behind in order to experience rebirth, regrowth in a newer, fresher skin. And of course, we are ourselves losing the outer layer of our skin all of the time, so it's not as noticeable as it is with a snake. And yet, we all have to let go of aspects of ourselves in order to grow, to be able to shed our skin and experience the vulnerability of new flesh greeting the sun and the earth for the first time, in order to be able to become bigger, better people. When I think of all the times I've had to shed my skin in my life, shedding ideas that I had about myself, pictures of myself, images of myself as being a saviour or being grandiose in all kind of ways, and how, I mean, life often creates situations to help us to shed those skins. But the snake from the animal world singularly offers us this very clear picture of what it is to break off one's shell and to emerge again, the same being, but in a different form, fresh to meet the world again. And I wish to thank the snake for that image alone, for playing that role in this realm of life, that role of something that has extremely potent danger in its mouth, that has the ability to squeeze its victims to death, that has this ability to strike fear in the heart, and yet is still its own natural being with a desire to survive, that must live at whatever cost, that feels this drive to survive, and offers this opportunity to think about what it is to be human, especially through this shedding of its layers, shedding of its external, no longer necessary shell. In honour of the snake.